The dinner rush had just begun, and the restaurant was filled with a soft mix of voices, clinking glasses, and slow music playing in the background. Warm lights reflected off polished tables, giving the place a calm and expensive feel. People came here to be seen, to impress, and to remind themselves they belonged to a higher class. For the staff, it was just another busy night that demanded focus and patience. The waitress moved carefully between tables, holding a tray steady in her hands. She had worked here for over a year, long enough to know the rhythm of the place and the moods of the guests. She knew which customers wanted silence, which wanted attention, and which looked for reasons to complain. Tonight, she reminded herself to stay calm. Bills were waiting at home, and this job mattered more than pride. She had started her shift early, tying her apron with care and checking each table twice before opening hours. The manager had warned the staff that several important guests were expected. That always meant tension. When powerful people walked in, mistakes were not forgiven, and staff were expected to disappear into the background while still being perfect. Not long after sunset, a luxury car stopped outside the restaurant. Heads turned as a well-dressed couple walked in. The man carried himself with confidence, the kind built from success and being obeyed. His presence alone made the manager straighten up. Everyone knew him. He was a CEO whose name often appeared in business news. The woman beside him walked a step ahead, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Her eyes scanned the room as if judging every detail. They were guided to a prime table near the center. The best view, the best lighting, the best service. The waitress was assigned to their table without being asked if she felt ready. She took a quiet breath and approached with a polite smile. She greeted them softly and placed menus on the table. The man barely looked up, busy checking his phone. The woman glanced at the menu and sighed loudly. Already annoyed, the waitress waited patiently, hands folded in front of her. She had learned that silence was sometimes safer than speaking. When the woman finally spoke, her tone was sharp. She questioned the menu, the prices, and the options, even though everything was clearly written. Each question sounded less like curiosity and more like an accusation. The waitress answered calmly, keeping her voice even. She had dealt with worse before. The order was placed with several changes, special requests, and a warning to get everything right. The waitress repeated the order carefully to avoid mistakes. The woman interrupted twice, correcting details that were already correct. As the waitress walked away, she felt the familiar pressure in her chest. Still, she reminded herself that it was just food and just words. She went to the kitchen, double-checked the order, and spoke clearly with the chef. Everything had to be perfect. When the dishes were ready, she carried them out with care. Steam rose gently from the plates, and the presentation was exactly as requested. She placed each dish in front of them, describing them briefly as trained. The woman took one look at her plate and frowned. "This is not what I ordered," she said loudly. The waitress looked down, then back at the plate, then at the order pad in her pocket. Everything matched. She spoke politely, explaining that the dish was prepared exactly as requested and offering to replace it. If there was any concern, the woman's face hardened. She pushed the plate slightly, as if it offended her. "Are you telling me I'm wrong?" she asked. The waitress shook her head gently. She apologized and said she would fix it right away if needed. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The woman stood up slightly from her chair, her voice rising so nearby tables could hear. She accused the waitress of being careless, untrained, and disrespectful. Her words were heavy and cruel, meant to hurt more than correct. People around them began to watch. Some looked uncomfortable. Others pretended not to notice. No one spoke. The waitress felt her face grow warm, but she kept her posture straight. She apologized again, even though she had done nothing wrong. Years of working in service had taught her that sometimes apologies were shields. The woman laughed coldly. Then, in a moment that seemed to slow time, she raised her hand and struck the waitress across the face. The sound was sharp and clear. The restaurant fell silent. The waitress stumbled back half a step, shocked more than hurt. Her tray slipped slightly, but did not fall. Her cheek burned, not just from pain, but from humiliation. She did not cry. She did not scream. She simply stood there, frozen, trying to understand what had just happened. Gasps filled the room. Forks paused mid-air. Conversation stopped. The CEO finally looked up from his phone. He glanced at the waitress, then at his girlfriend. He did not stand. He did not speak. His silence spoke louder than words. The manager rushed over, face pale. He did not ask if the waitress was okay. Instead, he focused on calming the guests, apologizing to the couple, and promising to handle the situation. The waitress was quietly asked to step away. As she walked toward the staff area, her legs felt weak. She pressed her fingers lightly against her cheek, still in disbelief. She had faced rude customers before, but never this. Not here. Not like this. In the dining area, whispers spread. Some customers shook their heads. Others avoided eye contact. No one challenged what had happened, but at a corner table near the back, an older man sat quietly. He had not reacted loudly, but his eyes had seen everything. From the first harsh word to the raised hand, nothing escaped his attention. He folded his napkin slowly and placed it beside his plate. His expression was calm, but his gaze was steady and serious. He did not rush. He did not speak. He simply watched. And in that moment, the balance of power in the room had already begun to change. The waitress stood in the small staff area, her hands pressed lightly against her face, feeling the sting not just of the slap, but of the shame and disbelief that followed. Her heart raced, and her mind tried to make sense of what had happened. She had been polite, careful, and professional. She had served thousands of customers, and yet, tonight, something as simple as doing her job perfectly had led to this moment. Around her, the other staff members moved quietly. Some avoided eye contact, unsure how to respond. Others whispered softly to each other, glancing nervously toward the dining area where the couple still sat. Fear was heavy in the room. It was a fear that had nothing to do with the physical act, but everything to do with the power behind it. The CEO was here. His girlfriend was capable of cruelty without consequence, or so everyone believed. The manager approached the waitress, his face pale and his hands slightly trembling. He spoke quickly, trying to sound calm, but the tension in his voice betrayed him. "Are you okay?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder at the table. "Do you want to go home?" "We'll handle this." The waitress shook her head, her voice soft but steady. "I'm fine. Just let me catch my breath." He nodded, uncertain, and stepped back. Around them, life in the kitchen continued, though it was quieter than usual. Pots clanged softly, orders were prepared, and other waitresses carried plates carefully to their tables. Yet the air was thick with tension, the kind that made everyone hold themselves a little straighter, speak a little softer. Meanwhile, in the dining area, the couple continued their meal as if nothing had happened. The CEO spoke in low tones, checking his phone and ignoring the shocked stares of nearby diners. The woman sipped her wine, her expression smug and satisfied, as if she had claimed some small victory over the young waitress. No one interrupted them. The restaurant, known for discretion and polished service, allowed the powerful to behave however they liked. But the older man in the back, who had been quietly observing everything, did not move. He continued eating his meal slowly, taking measured bites, his eyes calm but focused. He had been a regular here for years. known to some of the staff, but not to the public. His presence had always been understated, yet commanding. Tonight, his attention was not on the food or the wine, but on the behavior of the woman who had thought she could humiliate another human being without consequence. Back in the staff area, the waitress tried to steady her hands. She replayed the event in her mind, each detail sharp and vivid. She remembered the sharp slap, the way the room had gone silent, the cold look in the woman's eyes. She remembered the CEO's silence and the manager's panic. She felt a mixture of anger, hurt, and disbelief. A younger waiter, who had been close to the kitchen, finally spoke up. "I can't believe she did that," he said quietly, barely above a whisper. "I mean, right here in front of everyone." "And he didn't even say anything." The waitress nodded, not trusting her voice to speak. Words felt heavy, almost impossible to use in a way that could capture the mixture of fear and frustration she felt. She was aware of the unspoken rules of the place. The rich and powerful had their own world, and those who served them had to endure, smile, and remain invisible. Her mind drifted to the customers outside the staff area. Some looked shocked. Some avoided looking at her entirely. No one had stepped in. She felt a strange mix of loneliness and clarity. Loneliness because the world had seemed to turn away at her moment of pain. Clarity because she saw, for the first time, exactly how power and privilege could operate without accountability. The manager came back, adjusting his tie nervously. He tried to reassure her again, but his words fell flat. I'll talk to them later," he said. I don't know what to do right now." She nodded, understanding that he was trapped by the same fear that gripped everyone else. Fear of losing their jobs, fear of losing favor, fear of being punished indirectly by a man whose influence reached far beyond this restaurant. At that moment, a senior staff member, a woman who had worked in the restaurant for many years, entered the staff area. Her face was stern but calm. She had seen the waitress standing there, composed yet shaken. "You're not alone in this," she said softly. "I've seen worse behavior from people who thought they could get away with anything. Keep your head up. Don't let them make you feel less than you are." The words were a balm. The waitress felt a small wave of strength. For the first time in minutes, she felt less like a victim and more like a human being, whose dignity could not be taken by a slap or a cruel word. In the dining area, the CEO's girlfriend continued to assert herself over minor details of the meal. She criticized the seasoning of the food, the temperature of the plates, and even the placement of silverware. Her words were sharp, designed to intimidate, to show control. Yet the older man at the back remained calm. He observed without interruption, as if noting every action, every word, every moment of arrogance. Time moved slowly. The waitress returned to the floor, taking deep breaths before stepping back into the dining area. She needed to continue her shift. She needed to serve other customers. And yet, each step felt heavy, as if the weight of the event followed her like a shadow as she passed the table where the CEO and his girlfriend sat. She caught the woman's eye. The expression there was one of triumph, smugness, and entitlement. But the older man in the back made her glance shift, just slightly. His eyes held a quiet, unspoken warning. He was watching, not just her, but the balance of right and wrong in the room. The waitress moved past, serving other tables, maintaining her smile, keeping her voice calm. It was an act of professionalism, yes, but also an act of self-preservation. She knew that losing composure could lead to consequences far worse than a slap. And she also knew that holding herself together might be the only power she had in this moment. Back in the kitchen, the staff exchanged glances, acknowledging silently the courage it took to continue working. The whispers grew a little bolder, The younger staff members reassured themselves that they were not entirely powerless. The dynamic of fear was being tested, if only quietly. The older man finished his meal and left the dining area calmly, paying his bill without a word to anyone. His presence had been subtle, but unmistakable. He had seen the injustice, and he had chosen not to react immediately, allowing the scene to unfold. There was an air of anticipation, a sense that the evening was far from over. The waitress felt it too. Even without words, she knew something had shifted. She didn't know what would happen next, but she sensed that the eyes that saw her humiliation also saw the truth. It was a small comfort, but enough to give her courage to continue. The CEO's girlfriend finally leaned back in her chair, satisfied with her display of power. She had forced obedience through fear, at least for the moment. But the balance of the evening had changed subtly. The air in the restaurant carried an undercurrent of observation and quiet judgment that she had not anticipated. The waitress, breathing steadily, returned her duties. She moved with care, serving meals, clearing tables, and attending to requests. Each interaction was calm, polite, and professional. Yet inside, a seed of determination had been planted. She would not allow this moment to define her. She would not let cruelty dictate her life. And though she could not yet see the outcome, she sensed that justice had quietly begun to take its first steps. As the night continued, the staff worked diligently. The tension was still there, but it had transformed into a subtle awareness that they were not invisible, that their efforts, their dignity, mattered. And somewhere in the room, the older man's presence lingered in memory. A silent promise that the world was bigger than a single act of cruelty. That power alone could not remain unchecked forever. The next morning, the restaurant was quieter than usual. The usual hum of preparation had a slower rhythm. The incident from the night before hung over the staff like a thick fog. Everyone moved carefully, each action deliberate, each word measured. The waitress arrived early, tying her apron with care, feeling the lingering tension in her chest. She had not slept well, turning over the memory of the slap again and again in her mind. It wasn't just the pain, it was the humiliation, the feeling of helplessness, and the stark realization of how unchecked power could be. The manager met her at the entrance, his expression troubled. He had spoken with the CEO, or at least tried to, but his words had been brushed aside. The woman had left early, claiming fatigue, and the CEO had offered only a vague apology, one that sounded more like a courtesy than genuine concern. There was no acknowledgement of what had really happened. The manager sighed, clearly unsure of how to proceed. The waitress nodded politely, saying she was ready to work. It was strange, the act of carrying on as if nothing had happened, while inside, she felt a mixture of anger and determination. She knew she couldn't undo the past, but she could control how she handled herself now. The staff began their morning duties, setting tables, checking supplies, and preparing meals. Yet everyone seemed to move a little slower, careful not to draw unnecessary attention. Meanwhile, the older man from the previous night had returned to the restaurant, this time during breakfast hours. He sat quietly at a corner table, reading a newspaper, but keeping a keen eye on the room. He noticed how the staff moved, the way the waitress interacted with guests, and the subtle ways in which respect and dignity were maintained even in the face of fear. There was no dramatic display, no confrontation, just calm observation. Yet his presence carried weight, a silent authority that was felt by all. The waitress served breakfast customers, her movements precise and her voice calm. She greeted each person with warmth, placing dishes carefully and answering questions politely. Yet she could feel the awareness of the previous night lingering. Other staff members glanced at her occasionally, a mix of concern and admiration in their eyes. They respected how she continued to maintain composure, even under such pressure, The couple from the night before arrived again, unexpectedly early. The woman's expression was sharp, her eyes scanning the room for the familiar faces of staff who had served her. The waitress noticed her, felt a small flicker of anxiety, but pushed it aside. She had faced her fear before, and she would do so again if needed. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that professionalism and calm were her strongest tools. The woman gave a curt nod to the manager, who looked uneasy. Orders were taken, and the staff moved quickly to prepare them. The woman scrutinized everything, pointing out tiny details as if trying to catch someone in a mistake. The waitress served the table with care, double-checking plates and silverware. Her hands steady despite the tension dot. It was clear that the woman expected the same display of fear and submission she had seen the night before. But this morning, she met quiet strength instead. The waitress did not flinch. She spoke politely, followed protocols, and treated the couple as she would any other guest. There was no fear in her voice, no hesitation in her movements. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to anyone who was not watching closely, but it was there a quiet assertion of dignity. From the corner table, the older man watched. He noted the way the waitress carried herself, the way she maintained composure, and the way she treated the couple with calm professionalism. He saw the woman's impatience grow as she realized that her tactics of intimidation were not working as easily this morning. There was no confrontation, but the balance in the room had begun to shift. After the couple left, the manager called the waitress aside. "You did well," he said softly. "I don't know if they even realized they couldn't shake you this morning." The waitress smiled faintly, feeling a small relief. "It's just another shift," she said. "I can handle it." The manager shook his head, clearly impressed by her composure. "Not everyone can," he admitted. "It takes more than patience. It takes courage." The morning continued with the usual flow of customers. The staff found a rhythm, working together to maintain service while also keeping a careful awareness of the environment. The presence of the older man, though quiet, was like a calm anchor. He seemed to be observing not just the staff, but the culture of the restaurant itself, the way respect, dignity, and human decency were upheld even under pressure. By midday, the waitress found a moment to step aside, taking a deep breath and letting her shoulders relax. She reflected on the previous night and the morning. The slap had been an act of cruelty, but it had also been a test, not just of her, but of the environment around her. She realized that courage could be quiet, that dignity could be maintained through simple actions and calm words. The manager approached again, this time with a more serious expression. "I've spoken with someone," he said quietly. "There's a chance this won't go unnoticed." Someone with influence saw everything. The waitress's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. He nodded toward the corner table where the older man had been sitting. "That man. He's been a regular for years, but he doesn't just eat here. He watches and he notices. He saw what happened last night." The waitress felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. She did not know what would come next, but knowing that someone had seen the injustice and recognized her dignity gave her a new strength. It was as if a silent promise had been made that cruelty and abuse could not go entirely unnoticed. The afternoon passed with a careful balance of work and observation. The staff carried on, the waitress served customers, and the couple from the night before did not return. There was a subtle shift in energy, a sense that the events of the previous evening had left a mark. Fear still lingered, but it was tempered by the knowledge that someone had seen the truth and that dignity had been maintained as the shift neared its end. The waitress found herself reflecting on what had happened. She understood that power could be misused, that people could be cruel when they thought no one was watching. But she also realized that human decency, courage, and quiet strength could hold their ground. She felt a growing sense of confidence, Knowing that she had faced cruelty and maintained her dignity, the older man left quietly, paying his bill and nodding to the staff as if acknowledging their effort and strength. His presence, though silent, had left a lasting impression. The waitress felt a sense of hope, a belief that injustice could be seen, and that cruelty, no matter how bold, might not go unchallenged forever. That evening, the restaurant returned to its normal rhythm, though the memory of the previous night lingered. The staff carried themselves with a new awareness, and the waitress in particular felt a quiet determination growing inside her. She had endured cruelty, maintained her dignity, and had been seen by someone who mattered. The shift had been long, the day had been difficult, but she felt a quiet triumph, a sense that she had passed a test of courage and professionalism, and that the world had not gone entirely unnoticed of the truth. The evening shift started with a quiet hum in the restaurant. The staff moved with the practiced rhythm of years of service, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation that had not existed before. Everyone had felt it, the subtle shift that began the night of the slap and continued through the next day. The waitress, as always, arrived early, her apron tied neatly, her shoes polished, her mind focused on what she could control. She moved through the tables, checking each detail, ensuring that service ran smoothly. The events of the previous nights were still present in her thoughts, but she carried herself with a quiet determination. The older man returned once again, choosing a table at the back where he could see the entire dining area. His presence was calm but deliberate, almost like a silent observer of human behavior. The waitress noticed him as she passed, giving a polite nod, which he returned. It was reassuring to know that someone had seen her endure what she had and had recognized her composure. The couple from the previous incident arrived again, this time later in the evening. The woman carried herself with the same air of entitlement, her eyes searching the room as if she expected loyalty and submission from everyone around her. The CEO followed behind her, scrolling on his phone, his demeanor casual but confident. He seemed unaware, or perhaps indifferent, of the impact of the previous events. The waitress felt a small flash of anxiety, but reminded herself to remain calm. She had survived before, and she could do it again. The manager approached the couple, his expression carefully neutral. Orders were taken, details repeated, and instructions passed to the kitchen. The waitress served with precision, her movements deliberate, her words steady and polite. She spoke with clarity, describing each dish, answering questions without hesitation. The woman, expecting fear or fluster, found none. Each attempt to intimidate was met with calm professionalism. The air of entitlement in her behavior met an invisible wall of dignity, and she seemed to realize it. The older man observed quietly, noticing everything. He had a notebook in front of him, but he was not taking notes on the food or the service. He was watching human behavior, the tension, the responses, the subtle power plays in the room. His gaze lingered on the CEO's girlfriend, noting the way she reacted when the waitress did not flinch. He saw her face tighten, her confidence waver slightly. It was not a dramatic change, but it was there, and it was enough. The evening progressed with the usual flow of customers, but the atmosphere had changed. Staff moved with a new awareness. Guests felt the subtle shift, and the couple from the previous incidents seemed less dominant than they had before. The waitress found a rhythm that allowed her to serve effectively while keeping an eye on the table, ready for any outburst, but no longer intimidated by the presence of cruelty. Then, midway through the shift, the older man stood and approached the manager. He spoke quietly, clearly but not loudly enough for the guests to overhear. The manager listened carefully, nodding in understanding, and then turned to the staff to convey instructions. There was a deliberate calmness in his actions, a certainty that things would be handled correctly. The staff felt reassured. They trusted his judgment, even without knowing the full scope of what he intended. Shortly after, the older man rose again, this time moving toward the couple's table. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He introduced himself calmly, explaining that he was the owner of the establishment. The revelation was met with wide eyes from the staff and a startled pause from the couple. The CEO looked up from his phone, his casual demeanor faltering, while the woman's face shifted from confidence to surprise. The older man spoke with quiet authority, recounting the incident of the previous night with clear and measured words. He described the behavior of the CEO's girlfriend, the slap, and the impact it had on the staff and the environment. He did not raise his voice, and he did not show anger, but each word carried weight. The room was silent. The couple could not hide their discomfort. The other guests watched silently, the tension palpable. The woman tried to speak, attempting to justify her actions, but her words faltered under the calm, steady authority of the owner. She realized that there was no place to hide, no room for excuses. The CEO shifted in his seat, aware that his silence and lack of action had contributed to the situation, and that the consequences could now extend beyond the walls of the restaurant. The older man continued, emphasizing the importance of respect, dignity, and accountability. He reminded the couple that power did not grant the right to harm others or treat people as less than human. He highlighted the professionalism of the staff and the composure of the waitress, acknowledging her courage and resilience. Every word seemed to reinforce the values of the restaurant and the human decency that had been challenged the night before. The couple's attempts to respond were weak, their usual confidence diminished. The weight of being observed by someone who held authority and moral clarity had changed the dynamic. It was not a confrontation fueled by anger, but a quiet and undeniable assertion of justice. The staff watched with a mix of relief and awe, feeling that the balance of power had shifted in a way that aligned with fairness and respect. After the conversation, the couple was asked to leave. The woman's expression was a mix of frustration and disbelief, while the CEO's face was pale with the realization of what had just transpired. The staff discreetly observed as they left, the tension gradually easing. There was no dramatic scene, no chaos, just a quiet restoration of order and dignity. The manager approached the waitress, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You handled yourself with courage," he said softly. "You didn't let fear control you, and you maintained your professionalism. That matters more than you realize." The waitress felt a wave of relief and pride. She had endured cruelty, maintained her dignity, and now witnessed the consequences unfold in a way that reinforced justice. The presence of the older man, the owner, had made the difference, not through aggression or force, but through calm authority and moral clarity. The evening continued, now with a lighter atmosphere. The staff moved with renewed confidence. Guests experienced smooth and attentive service, and the lessons of the night were quietly absorbed. The waitress continued her duties, aware that her actions and composure had made a difference. She had been tested, and she had passed. She had learned the power of patience, dignity, and courage in the face of cruelty. As the restaurant began to close, the older man spoke briefly to the staff, thanking them for their professionalism and dedication. He acknowledged the challenges they faced and reinforced the values of respect and human decency. His words were simple but profound, leaving an impression that would last long after the night ended. The waitress left at the end of her shift, feeling a sense of accomplishment and quiet satisfaction. She had endured the storm, maintained her dignity, and witnessed justice in action. The events had been difficult, but they had revealed the strength of character within herself and among the staff. She walked home that night with her head held high, knowing that courage, patience, and human decency had the power to change even the most intimidating situations. The restaurant, too, felt different. The night's events had restored balance, reinforced respect, and reminded everyone that actions have consequences. The staff felt supported, the environment felt safer, and the values of the establishment had been affirmed. It was a quiet triumph, not of drama or confrontation, but of moral clarity, dignity, and the quiet power of human integrity. The restaurant was quiet the next morning, a calm that seemed almost unusual after the events of the previous nights. The staff moved with a sense of relief and renewed confidence, their steps lighter and their voices calmer. The waitress arrived early, tying her apron and taking a deep breath. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. The past days had been tense, but they had also revealed the strength within her and the resilience of the staff. She knew that today the atmosphere would feel different, lighter, and more respectful. The manager greeted her with a warm smile, a rare sight these days. "I want to thank you again," he said quietly. "Your composure has set an example for everyone here. It's not easy to handle what happened, and you did it with grace." The waitress nodded politely, feeling a small sense of pride. She had endured humiliation and fear, but she had maintained her dignity and professionalism. That quiet strength had been noticed, and it mattered. The staff began preparing for the day, arranging tables, checking menus, and readying the kitchen. There was still work to do, but the mood felt different, lighter, more cooperative, and supportive. The older man, the owner, arrived shortly after opening. He greeted the staff, acknowledging them with nods and small words of encouragement. His presence was calm but authoritative, a reminder of the values that governed the restaurant. He had seen the events unfold and had quietly ensured that fairness and respect prevailed. Today, he wanted to recognize the staff's strength and restore their confidence fully. By mid-morning, the restaurant began to fill with regular customers. The waitress moved among the tables, serving with her usual care and attention. Each interaction was calm and friendly, her voice steady and polite. She felt a sense of control that had been absent during the previous encounters. She knew that she had faced cruelty and had maintained her integrity, and that gave her confidence in handling anything that might come her way. The CEO's girlfriend did not return, and news had spread among the staff that she had been permanently banned from the restaurant. The CEO himself had made a brief apology and promised that such incidents would not happen again, though his words were less significant than the actions that had already taken place. The staff felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that justice had been served without drama or aggression. The owner called a brief meeting with the staff, including the waitress. He praised their professionalism, acknowledging the stress and difficulty of handling demanding customers. He emphasized the importance of maintaining dignity, patience, and respect, even when faced with disrespect or cruelty. His words were simple but powerful, leaving a lasting impression on everyone present. "You handled yourselves well," he said. "But more importantly, you did not let fear dictate your actions. You treated people with respect, and that is a strength many people overlook. Remember this. It is not about avoiding mistakes. It is about maintaining your character." The staff listened attentively, feeling a sense of validation and pride. The waitress felt a warm sense of relief, knowing that her courage and composure had been recognized. It was not about applause or recognition. It was about being seen, acknowledged, and respected for standing strong in difficult circumstances. Throughout the day, the restaurant ran smoothly. Guests were served efficiently, and the atmosphere was calm and welcoming. The staff worked together with renewed energy, supporting one another and maintaining a sense of teamwork that had strengthened over the past days. The waitress moved confidently between tables, handling requests and interactions with grace, her earlier fear replaced with a quiet confidence. During a brief break, the manager approached the waitress with a small smile. "You've done more than just your job," he said quietly. "You've set a standard for everyone here." That takes courage and patience. You should be proud." The waitress nodded, feeling a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced an unjust situation, endured humiliation, and remained composed. She had been tested, and she had passed. More importantly, she had witnessed the positive consequences of courage and integrity. It was a lesson she would carry with her far beyond the walls of the restaurant dock. As the evening approached, the staff began preparing for the dinner service. The restaurant had a steady flow of customers, but the atmosphere remained calm and controlled. The older man, the owner, observed quietly from his usual corner, satisfied with the way the staff had handled themselves. He knew that his intervention had been necessary, but the real strength had come from the waitress and the team. Their professionalism and courage had turned a difficult situation into a testament to human resilience. After the final guests left, the staff gathered for a brief meeting to review the day and prepare for the next. The manager addressed the team, emphasizing the lessons learned over the past few days. "We've seen that kindness, respect, and courage matter," he said. "It's easy to be overwhelmed by fear or pressure, but standing firm with dignity makes all the difference. You've all shown that, and it's something to carry forward." The waitress felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. She had endured difficult moments, faced fear, and maintained her integrity. The recognition she received was not about accolades, but about the understanding that human decency and courage could prevail even in challenging circumstances. She knew that her actions, though simple, had a meaningful impact on the environment around her dot. As the staff finished closing the restaurant, the older man spoke briefly to the waitress once more. "You showed quiet strength," he said. "It's not always visible, but it is powerful. Never underestimate it." The words resonated deeply. She had learned that courage did not always need to be loud, that integrity did not require confrontation, and that dignity could be maintained even when others tried to strip it away. It was a quiet, human lesson that would stay with her forever. Walking home that night, she reflected on the past days, the fear, the humiliation, the challenges, and the ultimate triumph of integrity and composure. She knew that life would continue to present obstacles, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them with grace and courage. The events of the restaurant had revealed something essential, that human dignity, patience, and quiet strength could change the outcome of even the most difficult situations. The story of the cruel slap, the fear, and the eventual recognition of courage and integrity would remain in the minds of the staff and the regular customers. It became a quiet testament to the power of composure, human decency, and the impact of being seen and acknowledged by those who valued justice. The restaurant itself felt renewed, its atmosphere lighter, its values reaffirmed, and its team stronger. For the waitress, the experience was transformative. She had learned that standing firm with dignity, even in the face of cruelty, could command respect, influence outcomes, and restore balance. She had endured, she had been recognized, and she had emerged stronger. The past days had tested her, but they had also shown her the quiet power of human courage and integrity, a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life.